Hi, welcome to Mastering Google Cloud. In this session, we will cover commands for Gcloud and gsutil that are very important for your certification exam and your day-to-day work. You can use these commands, you can memorize these commands, they are very useful. So let's work on these commands. Let's look into the Gcloud commands first. I categorize these commands in 7 categories: auth, config, projects, IAM, container, compute, and app. To understand how the command is formed, you have gcloud, then release level, which is optional, then component, which refers to the compute service for compute engine, container for GKE, app for app engine. Then you have entity, which refers to the instances, regions, zones. Then operation, which is actually need to be performed on that entity, like import, export, add, remove. Then positional argument, which is actually the name, for example, instance name for create instance. And finally, the flag, which is like preemptible for the preemptible machines and things like that. To install Cloud SDK, I have a link here, which I'll put into comment section also, and you can use that link to install the Cloud SDK. Gcloud auth commands are for user credentials and authorization, and I have given some commands. You can note these commands down. Gcloud config commands are for the configurations and current project settings. So these commands are important for the list of all the current configuration, for setting up the current configurations like projects, compute, things like that. Also, it will give you configurations list. So these are the commands that you can note it down. Gcloud compute are for compute instance. You can list, create, describe using these commands. There are more commands for compute. You have compute zone list. You can compute disk snapshot, can create the snapshot of the persistent disk. You can describe the snapshot using the describe command, and you can delete the snapshot using gcloud compute snapshots delete. I'm not going into the detail because they are very self-explanatory, and this session is just for you to document these commands for your work purposes and for your understanding purposes. For Kubernetes or GKE, you have gcloud container command. You can create a cluster, you can list, you can get credentials, and these are the commands for Kubernetes. For App Engine, you have gcloud app command, and you can create an app engine, you can deploy, you can browse, you can have different versions, you can list those versions, and that's using gcloud app command. Gcloud IAM for identity and access management. You can create the roles, you can list the granular roles, you can create service accounts and set IAM policy. So these are the major Gcloud IAM commands that you should be knowing. Next, let's look into gsutil commands. They are used for managing buckets and objects on cloud storage. They're part of Cloud Shell and fully open source on GitHub. We will also cover some advanced gsutil commands like ACLs, rsync, lifeline, signed URLs, and log notification and versioning. So let's look into gsutil in much more detail. gsutil mb command is to create the bucket. Once you create the bucket, you cannot change its name. gcloud cp command is to copy local files to the bucket. gsutil cp command is also used to create the folder inside the bucket. You can always list the objects using the ls command. You can use R option with copy to copy the entire folder, and M option with copy to copy in the parallel processing mode, where you have a lot of files and you want to copy all the files, so it runs in a multiple processing and copy the files one by one. Resumable transfers are automatically performed by the gsutil when you upload the object which is larger than 8 MB of size. You do not have to specify any special command line in the options to make it happen. So it automatically uploads if the size is 8 MB, more than 8 MB, it uses the resumable transfers. You can adjust the minimum size for performing resumable uploads by changing the resumable threshold parameter in the .boto configuration file. You can also set up the maximum size of the streaming transfer and also set hashes to enforce integrity checks. You can put a dash in place of source or destination URL for the streaming transfers. For over 100 MB of data, it's recommended that you copy the file from local instead of streaming. Access control list. Access control list allows you to control who can read and write the objects or buckets. By default, objects have same ACL as bucket. You can use get to list the permissions on a given object and bucket. You can set the permission. It's recommended that you first get the permissions into a file, then modify that file, the text file, and then use that text file to set the permissions on a given object or a bucket. Ch allows you to modify the current permissions on a given object. And to give a write access, this is the command that you should be using. Use -m option to update large number of ACLs. It's gsutil -m ACL set ACL.text, which is a text file with the access permissions, and then the bucket name. gsutil rsync command makes the contents under destination URL same as source URL by copying the objects or files. You can use the command as gsutil rsync source URL destination URL. If you use -d option, it will delete any extra file or objects which are in destination URL which are not in source URL. So this command gsutil rsync -t-r bucket 1 bucket 2, it will make the contents of bucket 2 same as bucket 1 and delete objects in bucket 2 that are not in bucket 1. If you use R option, -r option, it will for recursive copy. If you use -m option, it will perform parallel synchronization and improve the performance. Bucket versioning. Bucket versioning configuration feature helps you to configure a cloud storage bucket and to keep the old versions of the object. It prevents file objects deletion unintentionally. gsutil versioning set off and on command, basically either it sets the versioning or off the versioning. Basically it's enable or disable the versioning of the specific bucket. The get subcommand gets the versioning configuration for the bucket and displays whether it is enabled or not enabled. The sign URL command uses the private key for the service account to generate the cryptographic signature for the generated URL. It is used to provide time-limited resource access to the users of the URL, regardless if they have a Google account or not. To generate or to create the sign URL, you should use gsutil sign URL command, and it do not work on folders. Lifecycle command you use to get or set lifecycle management policies for a given bucket. This command is supported only for buckets and not for objects. It allows you to delete or change the storage class of the object based on certain conditions. You use gsutil lifecycle get and set command on the bucket. Here I have given two gsutil lifecycle examples. These are JSON files that will be used for setting up the lifecycle command. The first one is to delete all the objects that are more than 365 days. And the second one is to set the storage class of the bucket to nearline after 365 days. So here I complete the commands for gsutil and gcloud that are important and more frequently used in your day-to-day work. I hope you like it. Please put your comments, suggestions, and till next time, I will be setting up, giving you more videos on the GCP learning. Happy learning and have a nice day. Thank you.